Today we have two of the latest Shelby model vehicles from Ford Performance, the 2020 Shelby GT500 and my 2018 GT350R. So I spent a lot of time in the 350 and the 350R, a good amount of time in the GT500, and we're going to compare them, talk about the differences, the similarities, and try to at least compare them. I personally, started off the video right now, I can't really pick between them because they are a little bit different. And speaking of differences, we'll talk about the engine first. That's going to be the headline major change. The 350 came with a 5.2 liter flat plane crank, naturally aspirated V8, codenamed Voodoo, and this engine is truly special. It revs to 8,250 RPM, makes 526 horsepower and 429 pound-feet of torque, all naturally aspirated. Other part of the drivetrain, Tremex 6-speed manual only. There was no non-manual option available on the GT350s. Now looking at the GT500, this thing went to forced induction and went to a cross-plane crank. So a 5.2 liter cross-plane crank V8, codenamed Predator, revs to 7,500 RPM, and with that big old supercharger on top, makes 760 horsepower and 625 pound-feet of torque. Those are fairly hefty increases of power over the GT350. And the other big change is you could no longer buy a GT500 with a manual transmission. The 500 is a 7-speed dual clutch only. Both of these cars are rear-wheel drive only. No all-wheel drive available. They are front-engine rear-wheel drive. And the experience is actually very, very different. We'll talk about that a little more once we hop in the cars and go out for a drive, but they're wholly different kinds of animals. Speaking about the exterior styling, there are also similarities and differences. The overall body shape is still similar. It's the same generation of Mustang. And you'll note the headlights are actually exactly the same. Even though the rest of the Mustang lineup has evolved to a next-gen headlight, the 500 headlights stay the same as the 350 as the first iteration of the S550 chassis. This GT500 is more aggressive. It's got wider front fend, as you can see right to the side of the headlights here. The front intake area is massively open. It looks much more aggressive with that blacked out bar in the middle. The hood has this really significant bulge to it, and the venting there also looks much more aggressive than a kind of cleaner, more simple 350. Around back, both have quad exhaust tips, but the 500's got these giant kind of fixed ones where the 350 looks more like a decorational piece that's put onto it. Both of these cars could be optioned with carbon fiber wheels. So in terms of exterior styling, you would see exposed weave on the 500 if you get the carbon fiber track pack. On the 350R, it was painted. Neither of these have the carbon wheels on it right now. And also, the 500 kind of following the line of more aggressive. You could get the handling pack or the carbon fiber track pack that brings like the crazy kind of front canard vent things and the big fixed pedestal wing out back that's carbon fiber. It's also a very expensive option, but it makes the car look quite aggressive. This car here is finished in twister orange with the white stripes. My car is leadfoot gray with the black R stripes with the red piping on the side. They're different styling. They both are unmistakably a Mustang and unmistakably a very aggressive Shelby model vehicle. I can't say I can decide which one I like more. Actually, I can. I'm a little biased towards my personal car because I love my car. It's a little more sleek and cohesive, but it's undeniable that the 500 is much, much more aggressive. So before we get in the cars and talk about the interior, then pull them out for a drive, I'm going to pull Matt over here because Matt has been one of my best friends who owns the 350R, and he has all the facts. Full disclosure, Matt is an engineer at Ford, but this is our spare time. So all of your, what's the phrase? All of your opinions?
All of the opinions are expressed as my own and none of Ford Motor Company.
Done. Talk about all the numbers you have. What are the big differences between these two?
20-inch wheels on the GT500.
Yes.
19-inch wheels on the 350. That was stock. The brakes are bigger on the GT500. I believe it's 16.5-inch rotors on the 500, 15.5 on the GT350. A lot of extra weight up front. The supercharger adds some weight. The weight differences too. The GT500 I think they've been weighted at like 4,000 pounds. I think it was quoted 4,200, something like that. GT350R and 350 were around 3,800 pounds. It depends on load, fuel, that type of thing. Badging's a little different. Yep. The GT500 has the just the snake. The GT350 has the labeling on the side, and then the actual badge is like the squared off badge with GT350 underneath. Front end's a little different. The rear wing is different.
Also, new taillights on the back for the 500.
Yeah, the taillights on the back are the newer style, the 18 and up. They have kind of like a trapezoidal taste.
They've got a little angle on the bottom.
Versus the more straight for the GT350.
Do you have the acceleration numbers in your head?
I believe this one is around 3.3 seconds was what Ford quoted. If I'm wrong, sorry, I'm not an encyclopedia, but I know that one's closer to 4 seconds.
Yeah.
I think 4.2 for the R and like 4 seconds for the 350 because it's drag limited.
That big wing does add drag.
The drag times, if you're a drag racer, that would do about 12.1, 12.2 at about 120 miles an hour. This one is about 11.2, 11.3 at about 130 miles an hour.
The 500, without a doubt, is more capable, much faster. The performance is a next level compared to the 350R, which at no point driving this car that I feel like, oh my God, I'm in a slow Camry-like vehicle. But this thing is, I use the phrase irresponsibly fast because it is irresponsibly fast. And with that, thank you very much, Matt. We're gonna hop in the car, talk about some interior things, and then take them out on the road and talk about the differences of what the driving experience is like. The interior of the GT500 as compared to the 350, I can think of 4 main differences. The first one, the most obvious one as soon as you get in, is the newer digital cluster. It's one entire digital display screen now that's reconfigurable between your various drive modes. The tachometer moves around and all sorts of different data can be displayed, so it's very nice there. Whereas the 350 has analog dials for the speedometer and the tachometer, and then you have a small digital display screen in the middle. So that's much more modern feeling in the GT500. The next big difference is also very obvious. There is no shifter in the middle because you have a dual clutch only, so you get these nice fixed metal paddle shifters on the steering wheel itself. I think they're pulled from the Raptor and the Ford GT. They look very similar. They are made of metal, which immediately makes them nicer than any paddle shifter in any Audi currently made because the Audi ones are cheap plastic, so the GT500 wins there. And then obviously in the middle, there's no shifter. So you have this rotary dial that you'll find in anything from a Ford Fusion to a Ford GT, and in this GT500, park reverse neutral drive with a button in the middle for manual, and they kind of cleaned up the center area. There's a electronic parking brake actuator right there, cup holders obviously. The third big difference, which is less of a big difference, but sync has been updated, so the 500 has a later, newer generation of sync compared to the 350. Both have CarPlay and Android Auto, which is pretty much all I've been using in vehicles, so they're fine. And then the last one is the seats. They're the same like Recaro buckets, they feel the same, but on the 500 you get like different white piping and like this leather inserts and stuff, so it actually is really nice. I like it. I know on the newer GT350s and 350Rs, I think they added these colored inserts, like on the 2019 or 2020R, you have red inserts on the seats, which are really cool. Mine are a little more boring, but they do have red stitching, but that's pretty much all the differences. Everything else feels the same. This door panel, I think, is identical. There's that little white accent on it. The same center cluster here. You can get carbon fiber dash, and there's a chassis plate there. This car has back seats. You could get the back seat delete with the carbon fiber track pack. So again, same generation of vehicle. If you're going between these two, if you're upgrading from a 350 into a 500, it's going to feel very familiar, very similar. Actually, one thing, and it was a pet peeve that drove me insane, they moved the volume buttons around them like the track changing buttons. So like I was going to go forward an audio track and I'm used to it in my 350, and like the voice assist came up and I'm just like, I don't want that. So they reshuffled things around because they added some more functionality. There's a little Cobra logo for changing like your dash stuff and that kind of stuff. But overall, 300, the GT350 and the GT500, very similar on the inside except for those 4 main differences. And with that, I'm gonna start the 500 and we're gonna go for a drive. In terms of driving experience, the GT350 and GT500 are actually quite different, as you would expect given how drastically different the powertrains are. You have, in this car, a supercharged V8 with a dual clutch transmission, and the 350R, it's naturally aspirated, high revving, manual only. If we're answering the question, which car is faster and more capable, it is without a single doubt the GT500. This car is immensely, irresponsibly powerful and fast. It is hilarious. It has power at all points. It's without a doubt the more capable track-focused vehicle. The GT350, on the other hand, you pretty much have to rev the crap out of it to make any power. A friend of mine just drove my car for the first time yesterday, first time driving a GT350, and he's come from a background of BMW M cars, which are boosted now, and he's like, Eddie, where is the low-end torque? And Matt and I are like, you got to run it to about 4,000 RPM before it has any power. So that is a 350R, and the 500, the other thing is, the 500, dispel any possible notions you have of what previous generation 500s are like. This car is unlike any GT500 before it. It is insanely track capable. I've had the good fortune of doing a couple laps in a GT500 around a road course, and I was blown away. When I drove the C8 Corvette around a track, Spring Mountain, earlier this year, I was like, wow, this is actually really good for just a Stingray. And then I thought, I was like, this might be one of the best driving American cars. And then I drove the GT500 and I was like, oh, there's no comparison. Sorry, Corvette. This GT500 was insane. Out of all the cars that were available on hand that I've been able to drive around, do a couple laps, I mean, 48, Huracan, R8s. GT3 is one of my number ones because I just love the GT3, especially around a track. But the GT500 is right up there where I would literally fight somebody to take this around a couple laps. So when you compare the two of those, the performance is undeniable. The power increase with this car is massive. That is a massive delta, and especially the torque, and you feel it. Now, the transmission gives you a completely different feeling too. This dual clutch is very good. It rips off quick shifts. It's pretty well behaved most of the time, but it doesn't match having a manual. The first couple times I hopped in this car, I kept going for the clutch pedal. I was like, wait, there's no clutch pedal that I need to put to do anything. And it makes the character very, very different. Even though a lot of the car's parts are shared, the GT500 is just more brutal feeling. It's more just kind of almost not European feeling, even though the dual clutch does kind of lend to that impression sometimes. It just feels more advanced. Whereas the 350, especially the R, is kind of the more conventional, traditional, do it your own way, row your own gears, rev it out and enjoy it. The driver engagement feeling to it. It's more raw feeling. I think it personally sounds better. The 500 might be louder overall, but I like the tone, the unique raspiness of that flat plane crank revving to 8,000 RPM. 7,500 RPM in this 500 is plenty, and honestly, by the time you get up there, you are doing such a hilariously obscene speed, you don't need more revs, but the 350R feels a little more special in that regard. Now, if all-out performance is what you're looking for, this 500 offers it in a bountiful amount. It is hilarious. No traction yet. Whoops. If you had to ask me which one would I choose, it's a really hard decision. Rewind a couple months when I was shopping for my GT350R, there was no doubt in my mind. I was like, I want manual, naturally aspirated, high revving. That's what I wanted. I wanted a manual sports car again. I'd driven the 500 and I respected it. But I was like, I know what kind of experience this car is. It's very cool, but that's not what I'm looking for at the moment. Now, having spent a week with this car, I might kind of want to also add one to the garage. They're so different. I would never replace my 350R with a GT500. I would only add, and unfortunately, I do not have the means to do that at the moment, add another $85,000 vehicle. At its core, it still is a familiar Mustang experience. The interior is very, very similar. The exterior appearance, it looks like a Mustang still, because it is a Mustang. But when you're driving it and you get into the nuances and you experience it day to day, they are quite different. Matt and I were discussing it, and the way he puts it is, if you want a track car you can daily, you buy the 350R. If you want a car you can daily and also still track, you buy the GT500, which I think is fairly accurate. The 350R is like the special occasion car, and sometimes people will daily it, and I drove it a lot through the summer because it is still comfortable and you can use it, and it puts a huge smile on my face. But in regards to the comfort, the refinement, the advancements, this car it's newer. It's more comfortable. The auto makes it easier if you're in traffic. It is more powerful, more torque down low, that makes it easier to drive around. It is also, I feel like, more comfortable, possibly because it's a little bit heavier, but ride comfort I think is better, isolation is better. The sound system, the new B&O sound system, B&O sourced sound system, and the 500 is so much better than the little tin cans that are in the GT350R. Holy crap. Yeah. The other thing is, you know, I'm spending time with the 500. I haven't driven my 350 in a couple days now, and 760 horsepower and 625 pound-feet of torque really dispel anything of like, oh, I miss my Shelby. I'm slightly concerned that getting out of this car and going back into the 350 is gonna feel like walking because there is such an enormous power differential. In terms of price, overall the 350 is absolutely cheaper than the 500, sort of. So this is where it gets confusing. I will use the 2019 and 2020 pricing for the 500 to compare because the earlier cars had a lower pricing, they've steadily climbed up. But in the last year of the 350, the same year they built the 2020 GT500, you get a base 350 for around 60 grand. The R actually started at a higher price than the base GT500. An R started at like 73,435 and could be optioned up to about 80. So that option window wasn't as big. Whereas the 500 started at 72,900, but you could easily option this car to over $100,000 because the painted stripes was $10,000. The carbon fiber track pack is 18 something, almost $20,000. So right there, you can easily just drop 30 grand on it. This car, as a just kind of relatively more base level GT500, is $82,000, I think. So again, more expensive than the 350 and 350R. Now then, the other caveat is there's also a lot more 350s out there. They become a lot cheaper. I got my R 2018 with under it was 4,300 miles for under 60 grand. So that's a good deal too. The 500s are facing a lot of dealer markup. I personally don't like dealer markup, but we won't get into that right now. But in terms of pricing, that's the layout. The 500, you do have to pay a little bit more to get all that extra horsepower. So there we go, some thoughts on GT350 versus 500. Having spent a lot of time in the 350 and a good amount of time in the 500 now, I can definitely say there's some similarities, but overall the experience was very different. And ultimately, you can't make me pick between the two of them. They are two different. They're different kinds of experiences. They are both equally epically awesome in their own ways. Wow, it's been a lot of fun. And with that, make sure you guys check out the GT500 review, all the GT350R videos I have posted and will be posting. We did a couple videos with this car. It's been awesome. Special thanks to the Ford team for making this video possible. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.